hunting. Hi, Brian back again. Today we are going to be talking about hunting from the English perspective. In some of our other videos and even here at the museum, we talk quite a lot about Powhatan hunting, the importance of hunting to indigenous societies, and the fact that the English colonists here don't rely on hunting all that heavily. And I think it is sometimes kind of giving the impression that the English just don't hunt, and that's not the case. So if we look at hunting in England, what we're going to see is it is largely the stuff of the upper classes. The gentry, the nobility, these are your warrior classes. The old societal structure there of those that are granted land. The land generates revenue so that they can, afford arms and armor and raise forces and that sort of thing. And hunting's a part of that. Both in being wealthy enough to have land to hunt on, but also having enough of an income to be approved to hunt the king's lands. It isn't just about having your own land to hunt on, it's also about being, part of the exclusive club, essentially, to have access to the really nice hunting lands. But again, it's largely viewed as a sport of the upper classes, and it's also viewed to a certain extent as somewhat of a symbolic representation of war, if you will. Much in the way that we'll see, tournaments, being used as effectively war games, as practice for war. Hunting is viewed kind of in that same vein. It's that symbolic, representation of war, which is the function of the upper classes. So we see those in the upper classes that are hunting with the intent of eating, but it's not for sustenance. They don't need to go shoot their dinner. The meat meals are not quite as ubiquitous to the English diet as they are, in our country today at that time. But most meat meals that folks did have, it's livestock. It's whether it's from large scale raising and herding cattle to keeping a hutch of rabbits in the backyard or anything in between, pigs and sheep and everything else. You're raising your meat, and so being able to put game on the table is a pretty upper class thing to do, a gentlemanly thing to do. It's fashionable, but it's not necessary. And so again, being viewed as again from more through the lens of sport and sort of an expectation on that warrior class. Now, there's plenty of gentry in particular who don't meet the financial requirements to be legally allowed to hunt, and yet they're doing it anyway, which of course is poaching. And we see a really robust tradition of poaching in England in this time period, both to fulfill that sort of societal need, if you will, but also to support certain industries. We see a number of industries that benefit from deer, for instance. And again, it's not a subsistence sort of issue. It's glovers, for instance, wanting nice deer skin to make gloves out of, and poachers going out effectively industrially poaching deer to get the deer skin to sell to the glovers industry. So yeah, again, there's plenty of hunting in England, and to the point that we see some of these gentry, some of these men of the upper classes, really leaning hard into it. And in fact, I have a quote here that gives us a good example of just one individual's mindset. This is not necessarily the mindset of the entire social class or anything, but this man stating, "By God's body, I would rather that my son should hang than study literature. It behoves the sons of gentlemen to blow horn calls correctly, to hunt skillfully, to train a hawk well and carry it elegantly. But the study of literature should be left to clodhoppers." Well, that's a pretty intense viewpoint there. But he's saying he'd rather his son should hang, as that is the traditional punishment for poaching. So he's saying he'd rather his son be out poaching, be out hunting like a gentleman should, and risk getting busted and being hanged for it than to be sitting around reading. Now, that's not social class-wide. Plenty of gentry and nobility put a great store of importance on literacy and literature and that sort of thing. But I'll give you just a little bit of an idea into the mindset of the importance of a man of that social station being able to hunt and being able to do it well, being accomplished at it. Because again, amongst other things, it is connected with that warrior mindset. Now, we see a variety of hunting in the time period and variety of hunting apparatus used. When you're sport hunting, well, what could be more sporting than hunting something that could kill you back and doing it, up close and personal? And so we see, for instance, boar being hunted with boar spears, very commonly. And we also see hunting swords and that sort of thing, both with the intent of smaller ones being used to finish an animal off and even begin the field dressing process. But we also see big boar swords that are intended to serve much the same function as the boar spears. But you can see this is built very specifically for that purpose. You've got that sort of fluted blade, that quadrifoil blade there, to really go in easily, cause a serious wound, and the quillins there to prevent the boar from coming up the haft at the hunter that's just skewered it. But this type of hunting, while it's again very much in that warrior class mindset, this is not an efficient way to put food on the table in a time of need. So this is as we start to see the colonists contemplating adding hunting to what they're doing here in the colonies. If you're looking for food, this is probably not the means of hunting that you're going to be really leaning into. We see a variety of archery still in use for sporting and hunting at this time, both with a traditional bow and a crossbow. Everything from hunting deer on down to small game, commonly used stone bows as well, a crossbow that is going to fire a shot rather than an arrow or a quarrel. But more and more, we're starting to see firearms being used in hunting, and that's certainly going to be the tradition that starts to really become more common here. And so we see fowling pieces like this one here, intended for hunting birds, hunting fowl, and we see rifles and that sort of thing to a very limited extent. But these are going to be very common in this area in particular because fowl is a major resource here. The Chesapeake Bay sees a tremendous amount of migratory waterfowl coming through in the fall. It's a target-rich environment. It's a good resource. It's only available seasonally, but so these sorts of weapons being used with bird shot. We see references to officers leading entire companies of men with weapons loaded with bird shot out to bring in great store of fowl, as they put it. We also see references to, for instance, in Richard Frethorn's letter in 1623, as the colony is in a very dire situation, describing that they're not being allowed to go fowling, saying there's fowl out there, but they're not allowed to go get it. And there's a lot of things contributing to that. One, they're trying to get the colony back on track, and they're being expected to buckle down and get their work done. They've also just re-entered conflict with the indigenous population, and they may be short on munitions, and their officers may not want them out spending gunpowder on waterfowl. So there's a lot of things contributing to that, but certainly it's being done. Ultimately, though, what we end up seeing is as the colonies expand, as the colonial population evolves, and while they start raising livestock here and farming here and all that sort of thing, we do start to see hunting and fowling both putting a little bit more food on the table than what we see in the early years, but we don't typically see the colonists doing it so much themselves. What we end up seeing that hunting looking like very oftentimes, it'll be looking like this. English colonists, especially colonists of status, effectively native hunters, subsidizing their hunts, loaning or in some cases even selling firearms to those native hunters, and the basically the deal being, this in theory should increase his success rate in the field, and I get a cut of whatever he shoots. And this is how, as an Englishman, I'm going to put game on my tables here in the colony more frequently. And we see everyone up to it, including the provost marshal of the colony, the guy in charge of enforcing laws like you're not supposed to give firearms to the Powhatan, himself employing multiple native hunters. So this is going to end up being the reality. It's not to say the colonists never hunt, but it's not going to be a high priority for them here. They're often going to see their time, their effort, and their materials as being better spent on other pursuits. But as the need to include local game in their diet increases, they're going to enlist the help of the folks that know the area better, know the game better, and are already better at hunting, and just grease those wheels a little bit by providing them with firearms.